Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special episode of The Art Bros. It's me, Mike, as always, with Fancy Dave.
Hey, people.
And we are going to be talking about a fantastic artist who has done so many comic books that have inspired me and Fancy Dave. We're talking about Jack Kirby. It is, of course, his 100th birthday. And Fancy Dave, this was your idea to do an episode all about Jack Kirby. Why don't you take it from here?
Okay. So Jack Kirby, born Jacob Kirksberg, is possibly like the most influential comic book artist, or at least American comic book artist, that's probably existed. Especially for the superhero genre. All right. So there is a reason why they call him the King of Comics. All right. So let's start out. Mike, what do you want to know first?
So, I want to know a little bit about Jack Kirby. What brought him into the comics world? If you want to talk about his early years, maybe how he was grown up into when he started working into comics. Did he get formal training or anything like that? So, people, if you haven't noticed, I don't know too much about Jack Kirby. Fancy Dave is going to be our experts.
All right, so Jack Kirby, he grew up in the old New York. Like, he was born in 1917, so he was growing up in that area. It was very poor.
In the tenements of the Lower East Side.
Yeah. So, not the best, roaming gangs of street kids, like, beating each other up and stuff. He was part of that scene.
Of course.
So, like most kids, pulp novels and things like that. He saw a cover, got inspired by that, Like, I want to draw, and from then on, he kind of just did that. He tried enrolling, he did enroll into the Pratt Institute for a very brief time, although he didn't like it, so he kind of just went out and just tried finding work as an artist, making like street signs, things like that. He eventually worked in animation for a bit, but because of the basically like he was they're kind of being worked like slaves, just pumping out these cell animations and things like that. He didn't like that either. He was an in-betweener for that. He did like some of the Popeye cartoons, things like that. Eventually, he got his foot into comics and, kind of just did things here and there for science fiction. Eventually, and probably most famously, he was the original artist for Captain America. Mike, I think you have a few words for that.
So yeah, we're looking at the Captain America #1, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna pull that up right now. Look at that beautiful baby. Look at that. It's amazing. So that's a lot of you probably don't realize that this was Jack Kirby who did this iconic scene of Hitler getting punched by Captain America, and what a debut to go into the superhero world.
Before the U.S. even entered World War II.
Yeah, and just not that, like, just hey, I'm going to get my foot into this superhero game, because by then we've already had DC Comics. They already have Superman. They've already got Batman. They've already got their core pretty much right and going. And then Marvel Comics comes out with this by Jack Kirby, Captain America punching a world leader in the face. So it's pretty smashing, as the cover says right there.
Yes, as the years go by, one thing about Kirby is he's not much for subtlety.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was like a Jewish kid being raised in Manhattan at a time when if you had a problem with somebody, you sock him in the face. Mm-hmm. So, of course, he's going to do this for a guy who's very much against his people.
Yeah, yeah, and even within the pages of the Captain America comic, when he was still, in his early stages of his artistic career, other comic book publishers were looking at his work, because he was actually doing some pretty innovative things with, like, layouts and things like that in Captain America. And that was under his partnership with a couple people, Joe Simon.
What else did he do for Marvel around this time? Did he just do Captain America?
It wasn't Marvel yet.
Oh, it wasn't?
No, not yet. It was...
Timely?
I think it was Timely at this time. So, yeah, it kind of just shifted around. Marvel wasn't Marvel just yet. So... So after he actually was enlisted drafted into World War II, or he enlisted. Either way, he was in World War II. He was they put him pretty much as a scout, so he had to go up into enemy territory and draw maps.
Oh, so I had no idea. So he was actually in combat.
Yep,
He got deployed and he did tours.
yep. He was.
That's wow.
Yeah. So he came back. However, by this time, post World War II, superhero comics were falling out of fashion. So he kind of had to find. Well, he still had to find work, right? He had a family to
Yeah.
support, so he.
What did he do?
What did he do?
What did he
He
do?
he basically helped set up the romance genre in comics.
That's
So
beautiful.
yeah, yeah. So you
So
know.
I'm just seeing like all these images of these kids kissing.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I see the iconic. A lot of them have Simon and Kirby on it. Yeah, Simon. Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking this up. And I look at this, and this is what, right? Like post World War II. Maybe we're talking about late 40s, early 50s.
Hmm.
And this is the stuff that Lichtenstein was looking at
Yeah, yeah.
because it's got that feel. You know, it's basically pretty much lifted. Lichtenstein lifted this aesthetic and put it on canvas. And so that's kind of cool seeing the origins of that and how it influenced even more further into art history.
They're very tied together, and well, maybe they might be tied more in the future too. But after this, he went back. Marvel was being established by this point, right?
Right.
So, because superhero comics weren't quite popular still, for what he did for early Marvel was he would draw like monster comics. Like he would draw these very grotesque creatures, like Groot or things like that.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's early Marvel Kirby right there.
I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, yeah, but everything changed
Huh.
during the '60s when he did a book called Fantastic Four.
Oh, I've never heard of the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, yeah, no, kind of obscure, right?
Yeah. So he created the Fantastic Four?
Well, it's a partnership kind of thing between
Okay.
him and Stan Lee. There's arguments as to maybe one one side having it more than the other, but
Mm.
Fantastic Four was actually took elements from an earlier Kirby work called Challengers of the Unknown for DC.
Oh, I see.
So basically like the whole explorer adventurer angle into the
Right.
unknown, which is kind
Right.
of what the Fantastic Four was.
Yeah.
And here is where I think for me personally is where Kirby just exploded in creativity, and we're about to get into why some of that is. Okay, let's just talk just in terms of what characters he introduced into the Marvel canon. Oh, obviously the Fantastic Four, but he also
Yeah.
introduced characters like the Inhumans, the Black Panther, Galactus, and the Silver Surfer. Uh, Even after the Fantastic Four, he had the X-Men, the Avengers, Thor. Like the list just goes on and on and on.
Wow.
Like he is like the backbone of Marvel,
I had no idea.
and not simply just in creating the characters, but creating a very unique aesthetic that's become his. And one that actually caught your eye too, Mike. Once I started like introducing you to it, Kirby Tech.
Kirby Tech.
Yeah.
I love Kirby Tech. Look at that stuff. I'm gonna look at that. So Kirby Tech I love because it's so metallic. It's so angular. It's geometry. It's so much science put together. But it has this like organic feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a living thing. It's so complex. It looks like the human body just opened up, and I don't know. You're right. This stuff just caught my eye. Yeah, what can you tell me about Kirby Tech?
All right. So I was having to talk with one of the people from the Jack Kirby Museum, and he kind of like theorized that the reason he had like an interest with like just machines and things like that is maybe going back to his childhood, growing up in the in the Lower East Side. Well, just factories because people
Oh, right.
had like jobs in factories and things like that. So you see all these like heavy duty like industrial machines, and maybe him just like going around there looking at all this stuff like kind
I
of just
was
just left
it,
an
w-
imprint on him.
I was just at the Tenement Museum taking one of their workshop, there's yeah, one of those Taylor workshop tours that they did, and we were walking through a tenement. So this was the neighborhood Jack Kirby grew up in, and there were machineries. There was machinery in people's apartments. They worked out of these apartments and created clothes, and those clothes would go to the companies. So the manufacturing was done in Kirby's neighborhood. Now, of course, this is 1917, so things already started moving towards factories in the middle of Manhattan. But very much so, like that clutteredness, like the things that industrialization left behind in that neighborhood, the clutteredness, the close togetherness, that is stuff I see in Kirby Tech, especially with like sewing machines and pressing machines and even kitchens and stuff like that. Just so much metal happening in one small apartment is exactly what I see going on here on these pages.
That too. There's also he also had a lifelong fascination with machinery. Like he would actually have magazines of like what was called like popular science and things like that. To
Popular
look at
mechanics.
popular mechanics, and and as someone else was telling me, a couple of the other ones are I can't find the example now, but the guy from Jack Kirby Museum told me that there's one funny one where it's basically just his brush set that he just made into Kirby machinery.
That's
Like,
cool.
oh, I'm just looking around my room now. Like,
Yeah.
how can I machinize this?
Yeah. That's cool. That's like in Transformers. Then they have that thing that turns things into machines, or no, brings machines to life. There we go. Anyways,
No, yeah, but for me, like, yeah, it's so weird because it's so abstracted, like, but it still feels like it has weight and dimension to it. Like, it's
it really does.
yeah,
It's objective and it's non-objective
mhm.
at the same time. It uses the language of abstraction to take these machines and make them abstract. It's really cool. I'm looking at the famous one that people know, where the thing is holding up this giant, I guess it's an engine of some sorts, and I'm looking at a GIF of it alive, and it looks like a working organism. It looks like a beating heart. So it's just a wondrous, it's a mechanized marvel to look at. Marvel, I said it. Bam.
Yeah, it's and I guess it's just these ideas. Maybe he had like more. He had both like a positive and a negative view of technology. Maybe it being both destructive, but it also almost like being infused into the characters. Like with his work over at DC later, he had these things called mother boxes introduced in New Gods, which were like sentient computers like that were individualized to a person. It's just like I said, this lifelong fascination with just machines.
Yeah, and the mother box, I'm looking at the original Kirby ones, they look like smartphones. Yeah. So maybe he was onto something there.
Yeah, maybe he was. He had been working. He was an artist for so long. Like, you kind of just start sprouting ideas. Something's gonna stick at some point. Another thing I did not mention to you is another visual element completely with Jack Kirby's.
What's that?
Kirby dots, or AKA Kirby crackle, which is
Really...
like non-distinct energy. People, you've probably seen it like in older comics. Kirby crackle.
I see it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about right there.
Yeah, it's just like such a simple. Well, in concept, it's just a series of dots like surrounding a character or an object to like, give the sense that there's like an explosion or corona of energy around this thing, like especially like an energy blast or just surrounding the character.
I'm even looking at some where he uses these dots to show volume in characters and to show gradation. It's pointillism. Is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the Sunday afternoon right here, but just not in many colors. It's just literally just to inform us that there is a shape in this energy. Yeah, and especially even with this explosion, I'm looking at Captain America looking at an explosion. It just gives the dots just give the explosion so much more weight, and it gives the situation so much more gravity than just a glowing orange thing would. So that's a pretty innovative technique that he's thought up there. And of course, it adds this just organic look to the energy. It looks like it's flowing at all times, and it's pretty impressive to do on a two-page. I'm sorry, a 2D page.
Or even in just a small panel sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like well, partly these I guess we'll go into like the blockier looks of Kirby during the '60s. It's distinctly his, right? I mean, you have these very heavy inks, like in
Yeah,
there,
really. Very
very
heavy.
heavy inks. All right, so it's almost like, all right, so there's this other comic book artist. I was watching a documentary on Jack Kirby, and I think it kind of goes into like the heavy use of lines to express this like very dynamic like viewpoints or very dynamic look at the human anatomy.
Hmm.
What he said was Kirby wasn't really too keen on portraying violence in his imagery. What he wanted to show was action.
Oh, so what a baroque artist.
And it kind of shows like even when characters are still like especially when at his like more developed style like in the 60s and 70s like even when the character is still like it still feels like there's a sense of movement and you know like it's just tensed up and like it's about to explode with energy.
I'm
Like
so happy you mentioned that because when I see these things, these heavy outlined characters with lines carving through them, I'm sorry to be the art history nerd. I think of Michelangelo's sculptures, man.
mm-hmm.
I think of how there's so much energy caught in Michelangelo's leaning figures or even his David, and when shown in the right light, you
Mm-hmm.
see those heavy lines on those sculptures. The way they carve into muscles and arms and into the face and neck. You see that here in Kirby's work too. And I'm not saying the guy looked at Michelangelo and was like, I want to do that on the page. But what I mean is I see that similar effect, that motion captured right there at one spot. And then, of course, it goes into the Baroque as well, where he focuses on the most tense scene.
Mm-hmm.
Or even when someone is still, there's that tense tension, like you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, so like, yeah, like this is an artist like at the height of his, you know, artistic power we're talking about. Like, well, here at Art Bros, we try to make like we try to break down those distinctions between like you know things that might not be considered art, like or fine arts. But for me, Kirby is, you know, he is an artist. Like
Very much
you see
so.
it all here. Like, you know, a master artist. Like he has distinct visual styles that he can call his own. He has ideas that he can call his own.
He
And
also follows the rules of art too, but like he there's obvious just from a formal standpoint. There's heavy line. There's a thought in composition.
mhm.
So it's not just an amateur doing this. He's a very much trained professional.
Just from pure practice, actually, because he worked like insane hours, like making comics.
Which most people did. That was just a trade, right?
No, but he was on another
Oh, but
level.
yeah, he went on. That's right. Yeah, tell them about the thing you told me.
All right. Oh, the Kirby barrier.
Yes, please.
All right. So some comics professionals, from what I was reading, there's a term called the Kirby barrier, which means if I think it's like if you're able to make a quality comic within a week, you've broken the Kirby barrier.
That's awesome. He set the standard for the work ethic.
Yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry. He set the standard for like the grand or like the dream work ethic. Apparently, that's awesome. What else do you want to talk about when it comes to Marvel and Kirby
Uh,
and
this
yes.
idea of like gods, he Kirby had this fascination with like mythology, and you can see that with the characters like Galactus, which was basically his idea, him and Lee's idea of like the Fantastic Four basically fighting God, and
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
Galactus was like the result of
the
that idea.
the planet eater. This dude could literally just devour a planet, and then you want a stretchy dude, a thing made of rock, a guy that's on fire, and an invisible woman to go fight him.
Hmm.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, so like you can just see like this his like he had like an innate sense of like the mythic, and with Galactus, I think that's perfectly shown. Like it's like this. It's all of his elements like put together. Like you have the Kirby tech with the armor, right, and that big headdress, which just gives him like this supremely regal appearance, and he's always shown as being gigantic,
Yeah, he's so bigger than the world.
like a god.
Yeah, like a god, and his hands are so big. Like I've noticed in his compositions, Galactus's hands are just as big as his head.
Hmm.
So he looks like he could smash something just like that, like an ant. He can smash a planet like if it was just an ant colony with his bare hands. So that's thought in the character right there. And there's iconic scenes where Galactus is looming over somebody, so we get to see him from like down where at his feet looking up, and it's always his hands are like at center.
Hmm.
If you've seen, it's there again. That's thought and composition right there.
Oh yeah, it's it's partly the style came about because he had to draw so fast, so he had to make like a distinct. He had to develop a distinct style to make his stuff stand apart from the other artists. So
Hmm.
it was partly made out of like a sense to save some time.
I don't know, man. I think he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, but either way, yeah, it's still this is still a style that's his. Like
Yes,
yeah,
I
that's
agree.
yeah, like, and even going back to Gods, like his work at DC, he developed a series called the New Gods, which was basically, yeah, like the title implies, New Gods that sprang about like this old cataclysm of like some old set of gods that died. So we have the introduction of characters like Darkseid, Orion, the people of New Genesis, the people of Apocalypse. And again, going back to this idea of the mythic, like new gods, like
Yeah,
how
the new gods.
how
The
broad a
old gods
title
are
can you
dead.
get?
Now here are the new gods.
Yeah, yeah. So like
Yeah.
this lifelong fascination Kirby had with like just like the mythic, you know.
And what a beautiful like post-war like reaction too.
Hmm.
Honestly, the old gods are dead, the new gods. Now, I'm not saying the two are connected, but a lot of artists like Pollock were working out of this notion of what can art do for the world now
Hmm.
that atomic bombs have been dropped, that we've just discovered we can actually destroy ourselves. How do people respond to that? Now, is it coincidence? Maybe, but I
Okay.
like to believe that there's new gods and that notion of existentialism.
Hmm.
It's maybe subconsciously driving him. I
No,
don't know. We'll
yeah,
see.
yeah. Let's see. What else can we talk about here? I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but we're trying to fit it in within our time constraints.
Yeah. Oh, really?
All right,
It's
Mike.
so
Is
true.
there anything else you wanted to ask me about my thoughts on Kirby or?
So just if since we're still on this, like just the new gods, um, the thought about the mythic, he definitely was thinking more than just grounded universe. He was thinking beyond.
Hmm.
The guy was literally thinking into infinity. Um, so and now we see these new gods are going to be a huge part of our culture, pop culture now. So something that Jack Kirby created is going to be a big part of the next Justice League movie.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, I wanted to bring up a point about like Kirby in the pop culture. Like my first introduction to Kirby, and I didn't even know it was Kirby, was in Superman the Animated Series, which for some reason had a heavy Kirby influence. The New Gods were in Superman the Animated Series. That's
Mhm.
how I learned about Darkseid and New Genesis and Apocalypse from those couple of episodes in there.
Right.
Um, I guess my point being is, and this is going to go back to the way Kirby was treated. All right, so Kirby's a genius. Like, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
They're still using his ideas, like you said. The movie's about to come up, and those are like, they'll probably make like like $1 billion, $2 billion or something, some insane number.
Will they be good? We don't know. We'll find out.
We don't know. Yeah, the Marvel movies. Thor has like a lot of heavy. The new Thor movie has a heavy Jack Kirby art style in there.
Definitely.
My point being, okay, so unfortunately, Jack Kirby's also kind of like a poster child for how the publishers used to treat their artists, and
Mm.
that he demanded royalties because they were making so much money from like the merchandising and even just the comics themselves. But later on, the cartoons, T-shirts, what have you, toys mainly, and he just wanted to cut because they're making money from his ideas. And unfortunately, that's why he kept shifting around because they just kept giving him bad deals, um, and unfortunately was kind of unrecognized, by the population at large. Like we know Kirby, Like
Well, yeah.
and even for you people, you're finding about Kirby now, but it's just sad that like an artist of his magnitude just kind of went by the wayside in terms of like the zeitgeist. Like people need to know about him,
Yeah.
and these companies are making like billions of dollars from just his ideas because they can't come up with any of their own apparently. And it's just a sad state of affairs of how that was left off.
And it's not a thing of that they shouldn't be using his ideas because they can't think of their own. It's just give credit where credit is due.
Yeah. I guess that's what my point should have been. Yeah, just go support the Jack Kirby Museum. They make a big effort to have Jack Kirby known. Spread this episode. Spread like documentaries you see on YouTube. Like Kirby needs.
This is going to be a huge Kirby time right now. What now being his 100th birthday.
Yeah, and I guess going back to the companies making money, how many other artists can you say that are this influential that companies are just scrambling to barely keep up with his ideas on the big screen?
Yeah, that's so true. You're so right. They're literally sitting on a gold mine, and all they have to do is use it.
Yeah.
And of course, they got to give the credit.
Yeah, but for me, his art speaks for itself. Like it's an influence on my art. I wish I'd known about Jack Kirby earlier than I had found out about him, which was like a couple years ago. But yeah, like it's just. I guess my point being is, people want to say Jack Kirby. He is the King Comics, right? But people tend to just pigeonhole him as oh yeah, the comic book guy. But I think it goes beyond that with him. I think what we have here is a master American artist. So I would say he's probably that's the thing. He's probably like one of the most important American artists, and I think that's a distinction that has to be raised up or made. Do you kind of get where I'm going at with that?
I completely agree. He's a world builder and a universe builder. He's on the same level as Tolkien, and even now with Game of Thrones as J.R.R. Martin, R.R. Martin, and Harry Potter. All these contemporary people, writers that are getting credit for creating these universes that people are investing themselves into. A lot of people don't realize that this whole idea of the new gods, these people to challenge Superman, and now what we're going to be seeing in our pop culture coming up soon, was all thought of by a man.
Mm-hmm.
Just a guy from the Lower East Side in 1917. Mm-hmm. So it's just again that idea of a world builder, and this is him. This is Jack Kirby.
Yeah, distinct style that's completely his. As you said, just a treasure trove of ideas that sprang from his head. And like I said,
an American art.
Yeah, like one of the great American artists.
Definitely, he's up there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anything else you want to add before we close up?
That's it. I thank you so much, Fancy Dave, for teaching me about Jack Kirby. I have such a huge appreciation for him now, and thank you guys for listening to our little ode to Jack Kirby here.
Mm-hmm. And this is we just did like a very brief run through, so like there's still more you can explore. We'll probably do another episode.
There's people that have talked and done lectures on this. Check out our boy Arlen Schumer's lectures on Jack Kirby, and just Google him. You'll find so many people that have spoken about Jack Kirby even better than we have. Mm-hmm. Definitely worth a look. So, shall I sign off?
I think we can.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We love making these episodes, and we will continue to do so if you guys want us to. Follow us on all social media. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. Right there in our description, you can find the links. And we'll see you next time here on The Art Bros.
You're right. Later, people.